The next thing I want to talk about is the role of essential dignity and ability within natal astrology. And this is a topic I've spoken about quite a bit, and it's a topic that I will definitely be speaking about as I go into writing my natal astrology book, which I'm currently working on. We oftentimes use the topic of essential dignities and abilities as an extension of sun sign astrology. In sun sign astrology, we talk about planets in signs of the zodiac because it is easy for us to talk about planets in signs of the zodiac. It's very difficult for us to talk about aspects. However, the entirety of astrological delineation, 90% of astrological delineation is aspect-based. It is of imperative importance for us to learn aspects as the very first thing, as one of the very first things we learn in the beginning of our astrological studies, which is why at the Oraculos School of Astrology, from day one, you step into the foundations of astrological education. What is that course called? From day one of stepping into the foundations of classical astrology course, I'm already priming you to learn aspects because that is the most difficult part of astrological understanding, and that is where most astrologers, even veteran astrologers who've been practicing astrology for 50 years, 40 years, that's where they get stuck. So what we find coming out of the astrological community is this very deep and robust way of speaking about planets in signs of the zodiac. Because of course it's easy for me to talk about planets and signs of the zodiac because there are only 12 signs of the zodiac when there are thousands of types of aspect combinations. Of course, the point is aspects are the most important thing in astrology. And so I'm saying all of this to say that essential dignity is how a lot of it is practiced. From what I've seen in the 21st century, it is used as an extension of the sun sign astrology. Because now, instead of just talking about the sun sign, we now want to say, oh, the sun is in the exaltation of whosoever, or oh, Mars is in his exaltation, therefore this means this thing. Or Venus is in her exaltation, therefore that means that thing within your chart. Or, oh, wow, look at the moon over there. The moon is in her domus, whatever. Like we get so caught up once again in talking about the signs of the zodiac that we're really missing the plot. And the plot, people, will always be aspects, aspects, aspects. And if that feels or sounds like a burdensome thing to hear, then maybe you don't know enough about aspects. The aspects is the most important thing when it comes to the reading of a birth chart. Not your rising sign, not your sun sign, not your moon sign, not your node sign, not your nothing sign. The aspects, the aspects, the aspects make it and break it, the chart. Because you could have your sun in Leo from here until the cows come home, but if that sun in Leo is even sneezed upon by a square from Saturn, or even sneezed upon by a square from Neptune, everything you think you know about the sun in Leo just falls apart. Because the sun-Saturn is a very different thing. And the sun-Neptune is a very different thing from the singular understanding of the entity of sun in Leo, proud, mighty, haughty, likes to light up the room, maybe a little bit overwhelming, has a boisterous laugh. All of these things we think about the sun in Leo, all of those things completely disintegrate when that sun in Leo is afflicted by, for example, the Saturn square, by, for example, the Neptune opposition, because the aspects qualify things the most. This is something that we also find in horary astrology, which is a part of why I teach horary astrology as the very first thing at the Oraculos School of Astrology. I teach horary because the bottom line of horary is going to be the aspects. Even though we spend the beginning of our horary session trying to figure out what is the essential dignity of the planet, then what is the accidental fortitudes and abilities of the planet, we spend the entire first portion of the horary reading figuring out these placement-based situations. But when you get to the bottom of that horary reading, when it's time to actually make a judgment, your judgment is based on the aspects that are occurring between the significators within the chart, because the aspects is the most important thing. You could be essentially dignified until the cows come home, but if you are receiving a malefic aspect from a malefic planet, it completely augments the interiority of who you are as a dignified planet. So, in natal astrology, essential dignity is really of very, very little importance. It is of such little importance. And I'm going to go a step further and say in natal astrology, things and topics such as triplicity, term, and face are of no interpretive value at all. Now, I say this as somebody who has been in these astrological streets, reading natal charts, doing blind chart readings on the internet, on YouTube, for basically the last 8-10 years. And when I started doing blind chart readings, a colleague of mine, world famous astrologer, writer of books, everything, said to me, Michael, why are you doing that? That's such a risky thing to do. Because suppose you get it wrong. I had never thought like that, because not that I get everything right, astrologically speaking, but if we are astrologers and if our understanding as astrologers is that astrology describes real world events that occur within our lives, our leading premise can't be, I'm not going to give a public demonstration because suppose I get it wrong. How do we think like that? If I get it wrong, and I have gotten things wrong in public demonstrations on several occasions, I won't say on many occasions, but on several occasions I've gotten things wrong in public demonstrations. But the overwhelming reality of my astrological practice is a baseline of accuracy. And that baseline of accuracy, for me, is based on me risking my reputation every single time I give a blind chart reading, and also knowing which tools work. And from a delineation perspective, the tools that don't seem to work or that don't add additional concrete value to anything are triplicity, term, and face. Now, from a horary perspective, triplicity, term, and face, absolutely important. From an electional astrology perspective, triplicity, term, and face, absolutely important, because there are certain spaces in astrology where certain topics of astrology are more important than other spaces. Triplicity, term, and face, absolutely important in horary, absolutely important in electional, because of the ways in which we interpret triplicity, term, and face. Triplicity means so-so. Term isn't really a strength. Term is more, the planet gets to be more like itself. Face is, the planet is struggling. The planet is on the struggle bus, essentially. Use essential dignity within your horary practice, within your electional astrology practice. Essential dignity and ability finds some very real dead ends when it comes to a natal astrology practice. I won't even say dead ends, because essential debility is of vital importance within natal astrology, and essential debility is more important than even essential dignity in natal astrology. And the reason for that is because we expect for Mars to be in Aries. We expect for Venus to be in Taurus. We expect for Mercury to be in Gemini. We don't expect for Saturn to be in Aries, because that is Saturn's sign of fall. We don't expect for Mars to be in Taurus, because that is Mars's detriment. We don't expect for Jupiter to be in Gemini, because that is Jupiter's sign of detriment. So when a chart presents us with the unexpected, that is more noteworthy than when a chart presents us with something we just naturally expect to happen. We expect for the sun to rise in the east. We expect for the moon to be in Cancer. We expect for the sun to set in the west. We expect for Mars to be in Scorpio, because that's just what it's supposed to be doing. So it is not as noteworthy from a natal astrological perspective when the planets are where we think they should be already. It is noteworthy from a natal astrological perspective when the planets are places we don't think they should be. If you heard that Mychal Bryan was in his bed eating cheesecake, that's where you expect for me to be. If you heard that Michael Bryan was at the meat market slaughtering a cow and eating a big hulking piece of steak when Michael has been a vegetarian for all of Michael's life. From Michael was a child, Michael hasn't eaten meat. And you hear Michael is in the meat market hunting cows and killing cows. That is noteworthy. Yes, that should make the front page of the news because that is unexpected. Similarly, Mars is supposed to be in Scorpio. Mars is not supposed to be in Cancer. Jupiter is supposed to be in Cancer. Jupiter is not supposed to be in Capricorn. When things that are unexpected happen, that is when they become noteworthy. So I don't say that essential debility is more important than essential dignity because I'm a negative Nancy and because I want to, be negative. Oh, look at him just focusing on the negative stuff. I'm focusing on the stuff that stands out. And from an astrological perspective, your Mercury in Virgo doesn't really stand out. From an astrological perspective, your Mercury in Pisces stands out. And where it stands out very strongly in relation to the houses that those planets rule. When I see you have Mercury in Pisces, I don't start talking about your personality because for me, I've already completed my discussion of your personality in my assessment of the ascendant. Ruler of the first house, house location of the ruler of the first house, aspects to the ruler of the first house, planets in the first house, aspects to the first house cusp. I've already spoken about your personality and completely talking about your first house. I don't need to now look at your Mercury in Pisces to talk about your personality. Oh, you're a shy communicator. You don't like to talk because it feels like your voice is under the water and you find it hard to express yourself. And that's why people don't really understand you when you speak. And for that reason, you're shy and you don't want to speak. Why? I don't want to do that. You go to somebody else to get that done if you need that personality extension. What I do when I see you have the Mercury in Pisces is the first thing I look at is what house is that Mercury ruling within your birth chart? Because I know that that house more than likely is going to be afflicted. The topics of that house are more than likely going to be afflicted, especially in a chart that otherwise says that same thing. So the Mercury in Pisces ruling your second house already is pointing towards monetary problems. Notice I haven't said anything about you being a shy communicator because for me, that's not the point. The point is your monetary problems with the Mercury in Pisces ruling the second house, and it will be even further highlighted as monetary problems if that Mercury is also in a square relationship to Saturn, if you also have the South Node in the second house, if you also have the Mercury in the quincunx with the Neptune, if you also have other things to afflict that Mercury, then surely the Mercury will be a problem as far as your monetary life is concerned. This also manifests as a problem within medical astrology, this idea of planets within the signs of their detriment or their fall. From a medical astrology perspective, it's also noteworthy. And I'm not even sure that it's noteworthy from the perspective of that planet being in its detriment or in its fall, or if it's just noteworthy from the perspective of when any planet is in any sign of the zodiac and afflicted in that sign, the part of the body that corresponds with that sign will also often be afflicted. So, for example, you have Mercury in Pisces, and who knows, maybe you have a foot problem because Pisces corresponds with the feet. But the Mercury in Pisces by itself isn't going to say that you have a foot problem. The Mercury in Pisces afflicted by Mars, square the Mars, is going to say you have foot inflammation. The Mercury in Pisces square the Saturn says that you have slow, sluggish circulation in your feet. The Mercury in Pisces squared by Neptune says that you have swelling in your feet. That's how we do that. It's not just because the Mercury is in Pisces, it's because the Mercury is in Pisces and also afflicted while in that sign. And if your brain can only process the Mercury in Pisces, then you're really missing out on the plot. You understand? Anyway, there's a lot that can be said about this topic of the essential dignities and abilities within natal astrology. I think that it would make a lot more sense for us to just step away from that for a second and just leave it alone for a second, put it aside, and focus on the aspects. Focus on the aspects. And in focusing on the aspects, see whether or not you have some internal resistance towards that. And then ask yourself, Why do I have internal resistance when it comes to talking about aspects? Is it that I do not have enough knowledge to talk about aspects in the first place, which is why I keep on resorting to placement-based descriptions of a person's chart as opposed to dynamic aspect-based descriptions of a person's chart? Maybe that's the reason. If that's the reason, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't learn more about aspects or that you should just go back to doing your zodiacal dance. If that's the reason, then guess what? You need to learn more about the aspects because the aspects are the most important thing. I'll say one more thing. Every video I've seen on YouTube of a person trying to prove astrology, this conversation is making my shoulders hurt. Every video I've seen on YouTube of a person trying to prove astrology by interpreting a chart for people, there's a very famous one. There's a very famous one with this guy who was an astrologer, the most popular astrologer in Britain, and he's wearing like this funky hat with this thing on top of it. Whenever I see people trying to prove astrology and going about it by doing the normal dance of your sun, moon, and rising sign, it invariably is wrong. I'm not saying that it's going to be wrong every time within your personal practice, and I'm not saying that it's wrong in general, because if it's lasted this long, then maybe it's lasted because it has some level of efficacy or something, your sun, moon, and rising. But what I'm saying is the demonstrations on YouTube, and you go look it up yourself, astrologers get roasted, or I don't even know what to look up because I haven't looked at it in a long time. But you look it up yourself. Whenever people go to prove astrology and go about it through, I'm going to read the chart of this person and I'm going to start by describing their sun sign, followed by describing their moon sign, followed by describing their rising sign. All of those interpretations that you can find on YouTube are inaccurate. The one time I saw James Randi, or I think it was Penn and Teller. James Randi, big skeptic. I think he's recently passed away. Penn and Teller, also big skeptics, and I think they're still alive and kicking. But the one time I saw them say to an astrologer, wow, like this person is accurate, this person got it right, was with a Jyotish astrologer, a traditionally trained Indian astrologer, where the guy read the people's charts, focused on talking about the planetary combinations within those charts, and they were like, wow, you really hit this one on the head. You really got this right. Another astrologer I know in the West who has done this, who has proven astrology to skeptics, is one of the astrologers who I think is one of the greatest medical astrologers in the world, and that's Judith Hill. And Judith has also been on a panel where she had to match charts with people or something to that effect. I can't remember the story. I wasn't there. And admittedly, Judith is somebody who is very much a signs of the zodiac person. But beneath that is a world of aspect understanding. And this is one of the things I think is also a problem, because we hear people talk about the astrology they practice with their mouth, but what they're actually doing in their brain is something completely different. So you'll go to a conference with somebody who is a marvelous astrologer, but what comes out of their mouth is, oh, you are a Cancer, and therefore you're emotional, and therefore you like to be shy, and therefore your family means everything to you, and you don't open up and talk to people who aren't your family, but when it is your family, you're the life of the party and you flourish, and you get very easily offended because you expect for people to read your mind and know what it is you desire because you have that natural intuitive ability to know what everybody's around you. What you hear coming out of that person's mouth is a description of Cancer. But in that person's brain, if that person is really a brilliant astrologer, what they're doing through and through is they're looking at all the different aspects in that chart that stand to support what they're saying about that sign of the zodiac delineation. And you hear that and see that and you're like, wow, this person did all of this through the signs of the zodiac. When no, they didn't do all that through the signs of the zodiac. They did something in their brain that they didn't share with you vocally. And then you go try to replicate it in the real world and you find that it's unreplicatable. I don't even know if that's a word, but you find that it's unreplicatable because the astrology that comes out of a lot of great astrologers' mouths is very different than what's going on in their brain. And in the brain of every great astrologer is a treasure trove of aspects. Even if what's coming out of that person's mouth is zodiac, it's the aspects. Okay? So that is all I have to say on this topic. I hope that it makes sense. I hope that it resonates. And I sincerely hope that as a community, we move towards a place of just making more sense. Because of course, the scientists are going to throw rocks at us when we ourselves are still describing the whole world through the 12 signs of the zodiac. I'd want to throw rocks at us too, because how is it we have whittled a lifetime of astrology down to these cookbook descriptions of signs of the zodiac? I don't know how that happened. I do know how it happened. It happened because it was an attempt to prevent astrology from dying. It happened in the 1920s, this bringing astrology in the newspapers, because it was an attempt to prevent the astrology from dying. We're not dying anymore. Astrology is a $4.5 billion industry. We are not dying. We're well-fed people. We're not close to death. Therefore, we do not need to be practicing astrology in this survival mode method anymore, because we don't need to. So if we don't need to practice in the survival mode method, where people look at us like we're entertainers at a circus, and you have the disclaimer for entertainment purposes only, if we're not doing that anymore, then we need to be moving towards a direction where we're actually doing something that is valuable and weighty. And there's never going to be anything in astrology that is more valuable or more weighty than you sitting down and studying the combinations of stellar influences. Not the book, but yes, read the book as well. But you sitting down and studying what it means when this planet is interacting with this planet, and when this planet is interacting with this planet, and when these three planets are interacting together, what sort of results do they produce? That truly, as far as I'm concerned, and I don't mean to be this person, but that for me is real astrology. You telling me that you have 5 planets in fire signs, 2 planets in water signs, 1 planet in the air sign, and no planets in earth? My sister could do that, and she's never done astrology a day in her life. My nephew could do that, and he's 2 years old. It takes no brain power to talk about you having planets in fire signs, and therefore you're a fiery person, or you having planets in watery signs, therefore you're a watery person. What requires brain power and skill and expertise and mastery and time and years of study is knowing how to describe the relationship that planets make when they're in communication with each other. And to that end, I wish you all Godspeed in a lifetime of astrological planetary study so that we can all elevate the standards that are associated with our most illustrious field of astrology. This is my book, The New Western Medical Astrology, which is all about aspects, because many medical astrology books are all about signs. And I wanted to be the change I wanted to see in the world. And therefore, I wrote a medical astrology book that was only about aspects. So please go and buy yourself a copy of this book so that you can be a part of that change as well. And finally, we have our membership community coming up. I've been a participant or a guest speaker in a lot of other people's membership communities, and I think it's a very wonderful way to create a hub. And so at Oraculos, we are creating Mychal's Cosmic Conservatory. And in that, I'm going to teach you everything I know about everything that doesn't just have to do with astrology. Sure, we're going to be doing astrology research. Sure, bring your chart to me. I'll read your chart and I'll tell you how to read your chart. We have chart delineation clinics for professional astrologers as well. But I really wanted to make this as a means of practicing some of the more mystical sides of my spiritual practice, like the Kabbalistic Tarot. The Kabbalistic Tarot, as far as I'm concerned, is the astrologer's field guide to the universe. And I would never be the astrologer I am today if my mind wasn't first completely exploded open through the practice of the Kabbalistic Tarot. And it's been an itch that I've been trying to reach towards, and everything I've built at Oraculos, whether it's been the horary program or the solar return program or the medical program or the whatever program, All of these things have been me climbing a ladder that I created for myself so that when I sit down on the mountaintop of the tarot, I can just stay there for the rest of my life and die there. And that's actually what I've been trying to do for the last 10 years. Get all of this astrology out of the way. Write every single book you will ever need from me for astrological purposes so that I can sit down on the mountaintop and write my tarot book. For me, the tarot is the most important divinational tool in the West. And that's what I want to do. So I'm going to be sharing that with you within Mychal's Cosmic Conservatory. It's going to be our membership-based community, and you can find more information about that at the membership page on our website.